All my panelists are here. We are going to discuss emerging issues in internet governance in East Africa. And with me up here, I have Bob Ochieng from ICANN. He's not a stranger to us. He was here earlier in the morning. We have Mr. Patrick Mwesigwa. Welcome again. We have Ernest from AFRINIC. Welcome. And we have Grace Githaiga with us. Powerful panel indeed. I'm sure it's going to be exciting. So we are going to look at emerging issues within our region insofar as this subject or issue of internet governance is concerned. And according to our program, I think I'll go as per our program, we are first going to look at how the resources in our region are being used. And Ernest one or two questions before I hand it over to the floor, but I think let's hear from him first.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ernest Barrack, as introduced. I'm happy to be here. I was actually with some of you, I think it was a few weeks back, at the UIGF. So some of you faces are quite familiar. We were together last time, and what I'm going to talk about is not so different from what I talked about then. However, that doesn't mean that if you were there at the UIGF, you should not pay attention, watching me. I work as the policy coordinator at AFRINIC, and I'll talk a little bit about what AFRINIC is and what AFRINIC does. I am here to talk about the exhaustion of IPv4 addresses, what it means for us, what it is in the first place, and how we can go about that. And also hint a little bit about IPv6, why we need it, and what its deployment looks like so far in Uganda. I did not cover the entire East Africa because I figured we won't have that much time to do that. Okay, AFRINIC, we are in full the African Network Information Center, and we are a regional internet registry that serves Africa and those other countries within the Indian Ocean that are part of Africa. We're located in Mauritius. That is where our administrative headquarters are, but our core engineering operations are coordinated in South Africa. And we are supposed to have a disaster recovery center in Egypt. Our core function as AFRINIC is to manage the distribution of internet number resources for operators of IP networks in Africa. So operators of IP networks, these include ISPs mainly, but that covers pretty much anybody that runs an IP network in their enterprise. An IP network, for as long as you need to connect it to the internet, then you will need IP addresses, and that's where we come in. There are 5 other registries. AFRINIC serves Africa. There are 5 other registries that serve roughly continental geographic regions, and we have 5 registries, so there are 4 others. So there's RIPE, APNIC, ARIN, and RIPE NCC. Key internet resources that concern us are mainly IPv4 addresses, IPv6 addresses. So IPv4 addresses and IPv6 addresses are what are commonly known as IP addresses. So IP addresses have 2 categories. for those that didn't know, and this is what we're here to expound about a little bit today. They are what are called autonomous system numbers. Autonomous system numbers, the network administrators here that deal with routing functions at their companies perhaps know what AS numbers are. So AS numbers, if you want an AS number, we are the registry you come to for that, if you're located in Africa. Then another key internet resource that we do not directly, that does not directly concern us, are fully qualified domain names. So if you want domain names, if you want to register a domain name, then AFRINIC, that's not under our mandate, unless that domain name concerns reverse DNS, which is still a service associated to an IP address block that you have acquired from us. Out of curiosity, who of us, and please feel free to put your hand up so that I can know how to explain this further, or what detail to go into or not to go into. Who of us has never heard of an IP address? Please put your hand up and don't be shy. Never heard of an IP address? Never? Okay, good. So, we have one person. You've never heard of an IP address. 2 people. I believe that means there are about 5 or 6 of them, considering those that were shy. So an IP address, I'll quickly talk about what it is, okay? An IP address, I have a minute for that. Moderator, how much time do we have? I have 3 minutes. Oh my God. Okay, an IP address, if you have a device that is connected to a network or to the internet, at the time when it is connected, it is identified on that network by an IP address. Okay, as simple as that. And right now, most IP addresses that you see on any network, most of them are IP version 4 addresses. Okay, and that IP version 4 address standard was designed back in 1981. Okay, so most of the IP addresses that most of you know and use, the standard was designed back in 1981, and it was designed to provide a theoretical maximum of about 4.3 billion IP addresses back in 1981. And the actual usable number, the network administrators and systems admin know this. If you go into subnetting and all that, the actual usable number of these IP addresses is actually much less, depending on how you've designed your network. So at the time that the IETF was designing the standard, I don't think they had envisioned by how much the internet would grow. So back then they thought 4.3 billion IP addresses, that is more than the world will ever need for a considerable or foreseeable future. This clicker is really slow for me. Okay. To put this into perspective, the graph in front of you shows the IPv4 address consumption rate in Africa. If you look back in 1984 to about 1990, we're using probably less than 1 million IP addresses on the continent. From about 92 to about 2004, the number started growing. And from about 2004, the growth was exponential, quite high, because of the proliferation of the technologies that some of the speakers mentioned earlier. The cost of connectivity and the demand for it, or it's shot so much high, and that translated to the consumption of IP addresses. And I don't think those that designed the IPv4 standard or protocol had actually envisioned this kind of consumption. The graph in front of you again shows you on average how many IPv4 addresses are remaining. Of the 4.3 billion that the entire IPv4 address range caters for, that graph shows you in the different regions in the world what their inventory of IPv4 addresses looks like. Luckily in Africa, we still have about 40 million IP addresses left in our inventory. In America, in the USA, that is the second one, they have about 0.05/8. That's multiply that by about 16 million. So it's probably about 5 million IP addresses left. In AFRINIC, about, okay, Andrew, your comments will come.
Way out of date.
Actually, no. Actually, yes. Andrew, I will elaborate on that because they have some reserved. Okay. So, so in total, that's how it looks like. Globally, we have about 74 million IP addresses left. Globally, of the 4.3 billion. Okay, of the 4.3 billion, globally we have about 74 million IP addresses left. Africa, we have about 42 million. Right now, from the time this slide was prepared, I think we have about 40. And our consumption rates is about 10 million IP addresses per year. And if this is maintained, if everything else remains constant, we're looking at an exhaustion of about 4 years' time from now. However, our inventory could be depleted any time because one large operator could come and request for more than 10 million IP addresses, especially operators in countries like Nigeria, because MTN Nigeria could come today and say, hey, give us all the 40 million you have left. And there's no reason why we wouldn't give it to them if they demonstrate that they need it. So this goes to stress the point that, as a matter of fact, we don't have much time left with IPv4 address space. Some of you could ask, okay, where do the registries, where do we guys as Africans get the IP addresses from? Can we get more from where we got this from? No. In the hierarchy of IP address management, ICANN, a function of the ICANN called the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, issues blocks of IP addresses to the registries. Now, they don't have any more space to issue to the registries, unfortunately. And as we speak, from what you saw in the previous slide, apart from AFRINIC, all the other registries are pretty much exhausted. And only Africa actually still has a considerable and sizable chunk of IPv4 addresses. And that will unfortunately mean, or fortunately depending on how you look at it, that Africa's pool will run out last. Okay? That has its advantages and disadvantages, but for the sake of this discussion, we will mainly look at the disadvantages of that. The rest of the world will plan to move to IPv6, which I will expound on earlier before us. And the cost of connection to them will definitely increase if we are still using IPv4. And that's a big problem, and it should be a real scare to IP network operators in our region. And the other big problem that we face is that the rest of the world, because there is actually a real secondary market, I hate to call it black market for IPv4 addresses. And in that black market, actually an IPv4 address right now is close to $10. Sometimes depending on who is selling, it could even hit $20. That means if you want just a /16, which is about 65,000 IP addresses, you find yourself having to pay more than $1 million just for a /16, which means it is going to be prohibitively expensive in the near future to be able to build and grow your network best the internet is growing now, because with the Internet of Things, and somebody here just told me he has 6 TVs in his house and 2 amplifiers and all that stuff that is connecting. If every family has that, and that's probably where we are going, V4 can no longer sustain this kind of demand. Yeah, he also said that he's planning to put IPv4 addresses on his electronic cigarettes. So, stuff like that. So with this kind of demand, that's the Internet of Things for you. Somebody wants to put IP addresses on his electronic cigarettes. So if V4 can no longer sustain this kind of demand, and the only viable solution is IPv6. Okay? So IPv6 is the new generation of the Internet protocol that was designed by the IETF mainly to address the problem of IPv4 address exhaustion. It has its other advantages, which we shall not cover in this presentation, but it's the main reason why IPv6 was designed was to address the shortage of IPv4 addresses. It is designed to provide 2 to the power of 128 IP addresses. Those are very many, extremely many. Most people think that they will never be depleted, but unfortunately back in 1981, that's what the IETF thought when they designed IPv4, to cover 4.3 billion IP addresses. But yes, that goes to show you how much space is available within the IPv6 stack. The one, I would call it disadvantage with IPv6 is that it's not backwards compatible with IPv4. Fortunately, that's how it was designed. So that means at one point, we shall have to completely phase out IPv4 address space. Totally, at one point. It runs on the same physical infrastructure, so if you have your same devices, all you have to make sure is that the software on it is ready for IPv6, which is the case these days. Pretty much every Android cell phone, every iOS cell phone, every new Windows laptop or Mac laptop or Linux kernel starting from, I can't remember which version, they support v6. Most Cisco routers and all other CPEs, you'll find that they are v6 ready. Most of them, not all. I see Andrew shaking his head. Most of them, especially the ones coming out these days. At least I have a CPE at home that Vodacom connected for me, so it's v6 ready. And it is the only sustainable answer to the problem of IPv4 address shortage. So v6 is important to network operators because the only reason you need it is to stay in business. Why? Why do I say this? Your networks will continue growing. You need to connect new customers every day. And unfortunately, to connect new customers, you need IP address space. But the point is reaching very, very soon when there will be no more IPv4 address space. And your only viable option is to consider IPv6. This slide is it's pretty much the same question to what I just said. Yes, you might think we still have so many IP addresses, but yes, unfortunately, there are reasons why these IP addresses will be consumed very soon, and that I just mentioned earlier. And you're looking at a consumption rates of about 10 million a year. You're looking at about 4 years of total exhaustion. We have there's a policy in place that will allow us to manage the last block of IP addresses, the last 16 million IP addresses, in such a way that we'll give out small chunks, not big chunks, to those who need address space. But again, these small chunks cannot address your needs if your needs are more than what these small chunks can provide. So either way, IPv6 is the way to go. Now, the registries did a survey some time back to find out what are the constraints that businesses are facing towards moving to IPv6. And most of the answers were that they don't see a business need for it, which is exactly goes back to what I said earlier. The only business need for you to deploy IPv6 is actually to stay in business, to grow your network and stay in business, because without v6, the network will actually stop to grow, because you will not have IP addresses to connect new customers and address their devices and networks. Some of you might say, there is, especially the network administrators, you could say there is NAT, and we could use NAT. NAT works, etc. But unfortunately, NAT also has its limitations. As most of the engineers know, NAT has its limitations. I'm not going into the details. And besides, one of the limitations actually is that there are so many devices, there are so many NATed devices you can connect behind one IP address anyway. There are also limitations around there. As AFRINIC, we have been actively involved in evangelizing IPv6, just as I am doing here. And we have invested a lot of money into moving around the continent, offering training courses to engineers and anybody else that is keen on knowing how to deploy IPv6 on their networks. We have also encouraged policies in place that will allow easy distribution of IPv6 space. For example, now if any IP network operator, any ISP wants IPv6 from us, you probably won't have to pay anything to get it. Just talk to me and I can see that you get your v6 block and go ahead and start playing with it and see if you can deploy it on your network. We have a footprint of about 52 out of 55, I think 55 African countries now. So v6, ISPs have requested the v6 from us, but it's the deployment that is still the problem. That is where we have been doing our training courses. Our training courses are usually hands-on. I think we did one course here at UMI sometime 2 years ago. Thankfully organized by the Ministry of ICT and Data, and those who attended it can attest to the fact that it was quite involving. We also have remote labs that the community can actually access. In case you feel, right, we need to deploy IPv6, but we need some sort of test environment from which we can sort of try out things. So we have collaborated with a few partners to provide remote labs that anybody in the community can access for free. All you need is to just book it to make sure that no other person is using it. The labs have all sorts of designs and topologies that you can choose from, and try out things, experiment with it. Unfortunately, one of the big donors to those labs was Cisco, so you will have to be conversant with Cisco iOS to be able to use those labs. Feel free to contact myself or from our website, any of the AFRINIC staff. We are not such a big team to access those labs, so that you don't have to play with equipment in production. We understand that for many ISPs and many companies, actually, if you have equipment in production and you don't feel like spending on new equipment just to try out things, then you will need an environment like a lab to be able to try out things. So I'll quickly rush through some of these so that we can allow my other colleagues to speak. So way forward is that there's no future of the internet without IPv6. IPv6 is the way to go, and any network operator here should consider embracing it fully, because unfortunately without it, your business is going nowhere. These are a few statistics in front of you. That one shows the percentage of AS numbers that are announcing an IPv6 prefix. This is global in all regions. As you can see, this shows you a rough idea of the uptake of IPv6 globally. And as you can see from the trend of the graph, it's been going up and up and up. And also from the same graph, for different regions, you can see that Africa, which is blue, is roughly at the same range, taking up IPv6 roughly at the same pace with other regions. So this time we are not really being left behind, and this is encouraging. This graph, I got it from Google. The percentage of users of Google services that are accessing those services over IPv6. It's still not a huge percentage, but back in 2012, it was about less than 1%. And now it is 8%. So again, this shows you that IPv6 is really the future. It is here to stay. And if Google can go the extra mile to show stats like this, shows you that yes, V4 is probably on its way out very soon, sooner than you might think. Some quick statistic to show you who in Africa is using, has requested and received the biggest chunk of v6. And as expected, South Africa takes the 3%, which is not so bad, but we can do more. IPv6 visibility in Uganda, forget the others. This is show you who actually in Uganda, which ISP or which network operator in Uganda has gone some step to deploy IPv6. And from what I can see on the routing table, at least as of this morning, the Uganda Communications Commission and Research and Education Network of Uganda, ISAC was here in the morning, and MTN Uganda, their prefixes are visible on the internet. This is a good thing. As for MTN Uganda, yes, their prefix is visible on the internet, but when I connect to MTN's 3G, I don't see an IPv6 address on my device, which means they still need to go and deploy to the last mile for devices that are actually compatible, that can take an IPv6 address, which is most of the devices. I'm happy that Uganda Communications Commission has also taken the lead and requested V6, and the V6 block is visible on the internet. I have no idea what they're doing with it, but it's a good thing. This is confidential. As well as Renew, I hope that they translate the same to the downstream academic institutions that they shepherd. So in conclusion, we should be prepared this time so as not to miss the boat, because usually most of these old technologies and everything that so the bottom of the chain is dumped into Africa. We tend to use the oldest equipment, tend to deploy latest technologies last. But as you can see, V6 is the way to go, and we in Africa have at least gone the extra mile to try and deploy it at the same pace as the other regions. And this is encouraging, and every ISP here, every network operator here should take this as, it is serious. V6 is here, and we have to consider deploying it in our network. So trying or planning the transition and the migration at least in a few years from now. One thing I forgot to mention is that the academic institutions, I don't know these days how the Cisco courses, for example, look like, and what is taught as far as IP is concerned at the universities, but most of the material used to be based on IPv4, and it will really help greatly if such materials can be improved and changed to focus strongly on IPv6, such that this the students that are coming out of such trainings and sessions at least are conversant with V6, because V4 is really considered legacy right now. Lastly, our next meeting is going to be in Congo, Brazzaville. No, Point Noir, sorry, that is in French. Point Noir in Congo. It was Brazzaville before, but now it's changed to Point Noir. Now that's going to be in That's going to be in November. You're all welcome. Registration is open. I think if you go on our website, you could register. Attend. Attendance is free as long as you get yourself there. So start planning right now for the necessary budgets and everything that you need to take it to go. So we'll be happy to see you over there, and thank you so much. I'll be happy to take questions right after the other colleagues have spoken.
Thank you, Ernest. Please give him a round of applause. Now you know, when your network fails to work in 4 years or your devices cannot connect, don't start saying the Nini is not Nini. Okay? Wow. The other trending topic is on the IANA transition. Anybody who has heard about the IANA transition in the room? Okay, good. If you had this morning as well, you can be included. I think all of your work is cut out. Please be as brief as you can, because I can see these gentlemen are going into safe mode.
Okay, so just to take out anybody who's going on safe mode, in other words, trying to rest his eyes and be closer. So let me stand here. And this is one of the difficult topics to present in, how much time do I have, sir? 3 minutes. Imagine work that has been done over 1 year. To summarize in 3 minutes. It means that you end up with a lot of acronyms, but I also believe in disruptive engagement. So if I say something you don't understand, just stand up and stop me immediately. So I'll try to do this 1 year work, actually 18 months, in 3 minutes, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. It's a good point to start from where Ernest left, because ICANN is a long name for really two critical items. So you are talking about names, and those names are assigned. So that is why you have Internet Corporation for assigned names. So AFRINIC will assign you those names. Will assign AFRINIC those names, those numbers. Then you also have assigned names. So you have assigned names and assigned numbers. Assigned numbers is what Ernest has heavily talked about. Not go back there. Only to note that maybe the next digital divide we are looking at is a scenario where Africa is on IPv4, the rest of the world is on IPv6, and you cannot communicate, and there you are. So it's a serious thing. If you're talking about Internet of Things and you are free just getting into our borders, and your revenue authorities have no idea that even those devices need to be IPv6 ready, then I think we will be to blame for not informing them, because I'm sure they are not in this room. How many are from the revenue authority here, apart from Rwanda? Okay, so they are the ones who make or who allow these devices to get within our borders. Standards bodies and all of them. So we need to make sure that they are aware that they are creating a digital divide, even though they may not be aware. So very quickly, I mentioned about ICANN. This term, multi-stakeholderism, I think it's becoming fancy, isn't it? And it means different things to different people depending on where you come from, and to some of us where you went to school, like me. But from an ICANN perspective, we believe that anybody who in one way or the other interacts with the internet is a stakeholder in that. And today, according to the latest report from the UN Broadband Commission, the internet today has got 3.2 billion users, from 2.9 in 2014, and it is grown so hugely that it can no longer be ignored. And that is why, in as much as we are saying this is Africa, we don't mind who is making decisions around the internet. I think it is in our interest to ensure that whatever happens on the internet ecosystem has our input in it. Be you business, be you technical community, be you end user, you have a role to play in shaping internet policy work. And you are all stakeholders. This is what we mean by multi-stakeholders. So this IANA stewardship transition is something that has been going on for the last 18 months. Specifically in March 2014, the US government announced their intention to give up oversight over, you could say, ICANN. Now, from inception in 1998, ICANN has maintained two very important documents with the US government. One is called a contract. So basically, when the internet grew a little bit bigger and the government thought that private sector was best placed to manage these things, ICANN was created. But creating ICANN, they maintained a contract so that during those formative years, should anything happen to ICANN, and the government could at least come in and help, isn't it? That's how you take care of a baby, okay? So you maintain some control. That is no longer necessary. At the same time, there's another document called a formation of commitment, which really states how ICANN is supposed to operate in a multi-stakeholder model. So last year, the US government decided to let go of this oversight over ICANN to the global multi-stakeholder community. That community we described up there. And in doing that, they gave out 4 principles that as they get out, whoever is getting in needs to ensure that this is kept. And ISOC Global actually wrote a very detailed paper describing why each and every principle here is important. So I'll not get into that. Now, when this announcement was made, the community ultimately identified two processes to deliver this proposal. One process was focused on, developing the proposal itself that meets the 4 criteria above, and two, another one that focuses on ensuring that after the exit of the US government, ICANN still remains accountable. We don't become FIFA, okay? Ultimately, somebody should ensure that ICANN does what it's supposed to do. So this is kind of a picture of what the whole thing looks like. And I said so many acronyms, but let's just know that this is a cross-community grouping that is working on delivering the this first proposal. Okay? This cross-community group. And what they have done is to divide this work into 3 operational communities. So you have the community that deals with numbers here, you have the community that deals with protocols here, you have the community that deals with names here. And their final document is this proposal, okay? You have the other working group that is called the Cross-Community Working Group on Accountability, whose mandate is to deliver this proposal that clarifies how ICANN will remain accountable. So ultimately, once this team is done and this team is done, they're supposed to submit this document to the ITIA, basically the US government, through the ICANN board. Somebody might ask, can ICANN board sneak in some clauses there in these 2 documents, because they are ultimately the ones taking the proposal to the US government. I think we know that that will not be possible, because whatever has been transmitted here is publicly available, and you can always cross-confirm whether what you gave in is what reached the NTIA. So this is the whole picture. This is how it looks like. So very quickly, just a brief on how does this proposal look like, this combined proposal. Of course, like we saw, it came from 3 distinct communities, names, numbers, and protocol parameters. And this is how it looks like. So this side is the protocol community, the IETF, and you know you need protocols for names and numbers to work together. Now what they have proposed is, first, that the relationship stays the way it used to be, that they are contented with how ICANN has performed their role in terms of maintaining protocol parameter databases. And therefore, they feel that even in the post-US government stewardship era, this MOU between ICANN and the ITF remains, and of course under oversight of the Internet Architecture Board and performance matrices, that they are okay, or they are comfortable that ICANN continues to perform that service. Now the names community here, so names .coms, .nets, .ugs, and all those guys, now they are saying, or they are proposing, that ICANN and IANA, as it is today, be kind of separated into 2 legal entities, even though that what now becomes the post-transition IANA is a legally separate entity but fully owned by ICANN. So it is within ICANN, but it has a legal existence. So the lawyers in the room, you understand that something that has legal existence, it's a recognized entity with maybe a CEO and a board of directors or things like that, but fully owned by ICANN. And then that entity then performs the names function. Now, in performing that function, they are creating 2 accountability or oversight organs. One is the Customer Standing Committee that will ensure that IANA, or post-transition IANA, is meeting the SLA, the targets, between the names and itself. But at the same time, you have an IANA function review team that will periodically review the performance of the post-transition IANA, such that the performance of ICANN as a whole and its relationship with IANA is under review by the Customer Standing Committee and the IANA function review team. Now, because there is an SLA here, there's a standing review committee here. It means that whenever there is, or you do things offside, okay, then there's a team here that is constantly watching you. And even apart from that, there's also another team that looks at the overall performance, not only in IANA but also in ICANN as a whole. So this cuts across. Then you have the last group here of numbers, so the RIRs, who have of course also proposed the creation of an SLA. So this one did not exist. This one existed, but now they have also added a review committee. Now this review committee is composed of membership from all the RIRs. So AFRINIC, RIPE, NCC, all of them have representation here. And they ensure that this SLA is met. And based on their advice to the RIRs, they can consider to revoke this contract with ICANN or not. So this is the whole picture of what has been created, what has been proposed. I'm not sure how many people I lost after that stage, or how many are still with me. And you are expected to comment whether this makes sense, whether you think this is good enough or not. Now, describing this relationship is a 200-page document, which I want to encourage you to read. And okay, moving very fast on to the accountability part. So today, before we change anything, this accountability mechanisms already exist. So you have a functional commitments, you have bylaws, you have a bylaw mandated redress mechanism. For the lawyers in the room, they like redress. You have contracts which are documented. You have the ICANN board selection. As you know, the ICANN board is really coming from a diverse group of constituencies or multi-stakeholder groupings. So you have end users represented, and at large you have people representing names, you have people representing numbers. So that selection process brings a unique set of people to come and work together. So we believe that even that is accountability in a way. But the feeling of the community is that this needs to be enhanced. So this is how they looked at it. Currently, if you have a problem with ICANN, you are community. And being community here means you are end user, you are names, so all of you. So you are community. The only way to have redress is to through an appeal or something like that. But now what has been proposed is what we call an empowered community. So how does this look like? This empowered community that is being proposed has been proposed to have powers to reject or review the ICANN budget before it can be actually approved and finally commissioned. So you can actually say no, and ICANN will have no money. You can also remove and recall the board members. I'm sure these are the people who have ultimate authority over any organization, okay? So the committee can actually remove and recall the entire board, as been proposed in the current proposal. And we also have structural reviews that the committee can actually propose and implement. Then you also have proposals to include a different set of bylaws that have been made more difficult to change without involving the community. So those bylaws are not existing to date, like bylaws that anchors this clause of removing board members. It doesn't exist here. So that now becomes a bylaw that is even made difficult to change. Okay? And then the independent appeals. So you create, or the proposal is to create a standing member, a standing 7-member panel, from which anytime you can select 3 panelists to adjudicate on any case that you have. So that does not exist today. So it's called enhancing this appeals mechanism. So in summary, this is what has been proposed just to describe this diagram above. They consider reject budget, changes to the bylaws, approve changes to fundamental bylaws. So those bylaws that are being created, changing them has been made difficult if it is a fundamental bylaw. Removing individual or entire board members. And there you have an empowered community. So in short, where are we now? So we have just finalized, or about to finalize this phase 1, because those 2 proposals are now ready. They have gone through public comment period, which ended by the 12th. And phase 2 will be the entire year review after the phase 1 is consolidated and submitted. Our ask is to ensure that these 2 proposals are submitted to the entire year, this phase 2, in time, hopefully by ICANN 54, which is next month, if they could agree on all the proposals and clauses that have been proposed. And hopefully this will take 4 to 5 months to approve, final sign-off, and then phase 3 starts with the implementation. So in terms of timelines, we are still here. This is what we're supposed to get right. Okay? So I think with that, our ask is really to engage Africa and implore you again to comment on those 2 proposals. What I presented is what they're talking about in many pages. Whether it makes sense for you guys, whether you feel that is good enough for ICANN, is for you to now go here and say. So this opportunity is still available. Otherwise, thank you very much. I hope I didn't lose you all.
No, you didn't.
Thank you very much, Bob. I think we are still together in the meeting, and I must tell you that it is your responsibility to understand what Bob has said. Otherwise, you will blame yourself. Okay? We cannot always be playing catch up. We also need to understand why things are being done the way they are being done. So this is a critical phase, and I think it is important that as Africans, and especially East Africans, we be involved so that we can be at the forefront of getting the benefits of this revolution being caused by the internet. So next, we are going to hear on WSIS plus 10, the internet governance conversation has come a long way. And Mr. Mwesigwa, am I saying it the right way? Yeah. You mentioned that you were involved in this process way back when it started. And you know, in Africa we are used to hearing from our elders, folklores. And when you are told way back, you better pay attention. There is something good that is coming. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, moderator. Now, let's go back some more than 10 years ago. Last week I got a mail from Lydia. She said she wanted me to talk about WSIS plus 10 review process. Now I fear Ligan so much. So when I got the message, I started work. Now a friend of mine, I was in Geneva, a friend of mine came and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm preparing a presentation on the WSIS review process. He said, oh, you are reinventing the wheel. We already have a presentation which was delivered at the ITU UNESCO information session in July. So why don't you use that one? I said, oh, fine, thank you very much. So I prepared a presentation based on that presentation which was delivered in July at the UN headquarters in New York. Originally the presentation is 30 slides, but today I was warned that I have only 3 minutes. So I have compressed it to only 4 slides. Now this process, well, we go back to 2003, 2005. 2003, that's when we had the WSIS summit in Geneva. The process itself started in 2002. Then it was agreed we would have 2 summits. The first summit would be in Geneva in 2003. Then the next summit would be in Tunis in 2005. And as I said before, I participated in both of these summits. Now, towards 2015, it was agreed that we should now start the review process. Unfortunately, I've not been very active in the review process, but I got a lot of material from the WSIS website on what has gone on since that time. The review process itself started in 2013, where a number of stakeholders were involved in this review process. It was being, included a lot of these UN agencies which you see on the bottom, and I wanted to make sure that I keep their logos there to recognize their work. Now, there have been a number of meetings held to review the WSIS process. Key of these meetings was one which was held in June 2014, coordinated by the ITU. This was the WSIS plus 10 high-level event. Two basic outputs. They had 2 basic outputs. One of them, they call it WSIS plus 10 statement on implementation of WSIS outcomes. And the second output is WSIS plus 10 vision for WSIS beyond 2015. And all these documents can be accessed on the WSIS website, and there are more details in my larger slide, in my bigger presentation on some of the key outcomes in these processes. Now, the first kickoff meeting at the UN was in June this year, and the final review will be done in December 2015. This is when we shall see the way forward as far as this is concerned. Now, let's go back in 2003. These are the targets we agreed to achieve by 2015. That is connecting all villages, all secondary schools, and so on. And I remember actually I participated in some of these discussions, and in under bullet 4 I squeezed in connecting all post offices. I remember this was from Uganda. We said all post offices should also be connected. And actually, this has had an impact, especially in Kenya. You have heard of the Huduma project in Kenya, where you can get all e-government services at the post office. It's as a result of connecting all post offices. But there are a lot of these targets which we agreed to achieve by 2015. And indeed, I must say, a lot of progress has been done in achieving these targets, but as we have been hearing since this morning, we still have work to do. There are also a lot of challenges we have to address. You have heard of lack of local content being a challenge. We have heard of affordability many times this morning. We have had capacity building and technology transfer. Still remains a challenge. Limited commercial power, limited infrastructure. Of course, information security and privacy are key challenges. And we have been hearing that there is gender inequality in accessing ICTs. But at least we don't have policies specifically, eliminating women from accessing ICTs. But I'm told it's the real problem, that women are facing challenges accessing especially the internet. I only know one case of a lady. She's a working lady, and her husband has denied her to buy a mobile phone. So if you want to call this lady, you can only call her from her office. After office hours, she's off. That's the only case I've had. But otherwise, there's no deliberate policy really to eliminate women from accessing ICTs. But I recognize it is a challenge that has been mentioned many times this morning. Now, after reviewing what has been happening during the WSIS process, I have proposed these recommendations for this forum. This is just food for thought, and this is from me, myself. It's not from these other organizations you see down there. I'm saying we should come up with innovative mechanisms to accelerate access to the internet for women. We should implement measures to enable affordable and relevant ICTs for all citizens so as to benefit from the enormous potential of ICTs. We should encourage all stakeholders to put in place measures to achieve universal access by 2020. I think this 2020 target comes from the ITU Agenda 2020. We should enhance efforts in capacity building and technology transfer so as to address the digital divide. The digital divide still remains real. We should explore opportunities presented by clean energy and reuse. As we've been hearing from one presenter this afternoon, who talked about e-waste and so on. I think this is an issue we need to address and make sure that the ICT waste is safely disposed to mitigate against environmental impact. We should also strengthen governance of the internet through an open, inclusive, transparent process. We have just heard this from the previous speaker. We should strengthen internationalization of internet governance as set forth in Twin's agenda. I think we have heard it again from my colleague here. We should increase efforts in ICT data collection. Yeah, ITU has been gathering data on ICT use, but sometimes they face challenges in providing them with useful data. This is an area we need to strengthen going forward. Now, all through the discussions of WSIS review process, there is agreement that actually we need to extend the mandate of the IGF. But in all those proposals, they propose extending by X years. Nobody has committed himself as to how many years we should extend the IGF. Here I'm proposing, that's why it is still in square bracket, you to think when you go to Brazil, those of you who go there, should we talk of 5 years or 10 years extension? Definitely we need an extension, but we have to agree on the period which is appropriate for this extension of the IGF, because we have seen a lot of benefits from the IGF forums. Similarly, we need to extend the WSIS agenda for another 5 years, and we have a review at the end of the 5 years. So this is food for thought for you to think about. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mwesigwa. Another round of applause for him. He has indeed hit the nail on the head. Moving on, during the second phase of the WSIS process, that one held in Tunis, there was something on enhanced cooperation that came up. And I was trying to figure out the meaning of enhanced cooperation, and I actually found out that it means different things to different people. And I think Grace is going to tell us what it means to the people who are sitting in this room. So welcome, Grace.
I prefer standing so that I don't doze. After being the last speaker in a session that sounded so technical. I just thought I was going, it's better for me to stand. Enhanced, okay, this gadget. Okay, good. Enhanced cooperation, like Barrack says, there have been different discussions. By the way, how many people have heard about the CSTD work on enhanced cooperation? Commission on Science, Technology and Development, the UN Commission on Science. Okay, no acronyms. Okay, so like Barrack has said, there have been different discussions on what enhanced cooperation means. I had the privilege to participate for almost a full year last year in the discussions on enhanced cooperation. And it was quite intriguing because even after 1 year, when it came to the end of the year and for us, our mandates to come to an end, we still did not agree on what we had been meant to agree. So enhanced cooperation, some people see it as a process to facilitate and contribute to multi-stakeholder dialogue through formal and informal cooperation arrangements. And these forms of cooperation that have emerged have ranged from information and experience sharing, consensus building, and fundraising to transfer of technical knowledge and capacity building. So anything within that can be termed as enhanced cooperation. Now, enhanced cooperation, the call for enhanced cooperation in internet governance actually emanates from the second phase of the World Summit on Information. And Patrick has just spoken about WSIS, which means that my presentation is also dovetailing into his. And that was in 2005. And this came from at the end of that meeting, there was a document called the Tunis Agenda on Information Society. This was seen as a consensus statement that was adopted after that meeting. And it established guidelines for policy-oriented discussions of IG, internet governance, and then identified 2 mechanisms required for development of internet governance. One was the Internet Governance Forum, which we have been having. Globally, this is going to be the 10th year, right, Barrack? This is going to be the 10th year. And Patrick has spoken about the need for renewal. Now, this happens to be a very important year because in December, there's going to be a high-level meeting of governments, and they will determine whether the IGF will continue. So the IGF is actually coming up for renewal, and like Patrick has said, this will also form part of the discussions that will take place in Brazil, but the decision will be made in December. And so this is very critical, the discussions that are coming on, we need to lobby our governments, to support the renewal when it comes to that meeting. Because I'll be there, and like sometimes they say, some of, with due respects, some of our governments go to such meetings, they've not been engaging, they've not been participating. So by the time they are going there, sometimes, they just follow what G77 will suggest without really having to engage. So I think it's also our responsibility to engage with the relevant authorities so that we encourage them to support that renewal. And then so those two, the guidelines, one was on enhanced Internet Governance Forum, and then the other one on enhanced cooperation on international public policy on issues pertaining to Internet governance. Now, when it came to Internet Governance Forum, it peaked off, and this is the 10th year. However, when it came to enhanced cooperation, there were certain, it exactly didn't peak with the, what's the word? Okay, senior moments. It's, there wasn't that energy like in internet governance. So it's important to emphasize that the Tunis agenda recognized the need for enhanced cooperation in the future to enable governments on an equal footing to carry out roles and responsibilities in international public policy issues pertaining to internet, but not in the day-to-day technical and operation matters that do impact on international public policy. And that has been the issue. The fact that governments feel they should not participate on an equal footing. So that word was actually part of the drama last year, because you know, there are tensions in that, because some governments argue that they come into these processes as elected governments, so they have the mandate of the people. And so they feel when they sit, they have the mandate of the people, and they should not be treated as any other equal partner in this voting. They also argue that when they come into these processes, they are coming in as legitimate you know, representatives of the people from their countries, and therefore they don't feel they should sit. But the tension then is internet developed without the government. It first developed without the government. So we already have okay, acronyms. We already have ICANN dealing with you know, domain and names. We have other organizations dealing with standards of internet, and then government just came in now. Iran that felt that governments are sovereign, they should not be sit together with civil society on an equal footing. And so the Tunis agenda recognized the need for development of such policy by government, but in consultation with stakeholders. So what has been the process, you know, the process? So in 2006, there were informal consultations. No agreement was arrived at. In 2008, the UN Secretary General invited 10 organizations to report on enhanced cooperation. These organizations were ICANN, the ITU, the World Wide Web Consortium, Council of Europe, ISOC, Organization for Economic Cooperation, UNESCO, WIPO, the Number Resource Organization, and then the Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF. They all submitted their contributions of, you know, of what they felt was enhanced cooperation. Then in 2010, again, the Secretary General convened now a multi-stakeholder consultation. And again, no clear agreement. Then in 2012, the UN Commission on Science and Technology chair convened another multi-stakeholder consultation, and this was with a view to identify a shared understanding about what enhanced cooperation on public policy issues pertaining to internet. And then, of course, like I said, some governments and participants felt that the Tunis agenda had already established two distinct processes, and they felt that the IGF could have the multi-stakeholder where people can talk on an equal footing, but then on enhanced cooperation, governments had a major role. I don't think that's important. I just wanted to say that even with all those debates, it was very clear that the Tunis agenda had actually invited the chair to establish a working group on enhanced cooperation and examine the mandate of WSIS regarding enhanced cooperation. And this was through, you know, this was meant to seek and compile and review inputs from all member states. So then a report was made last year. Again, a report that we didn't agree on anything substantive, but just pointing out what the points of tensions were. And then, still last year, the Uganda government and Kenya government became the new member states in the working group. There are just a few other African countries. In the previous working group, the one that I participated in, Rwanda was a member, you know, the government of Rwanda. And so the government of Uganda and Kenya are members until 2018. And usually the structure is multi-stakeholder, so there are actually states, There are civil society, business, academia, technical, international organizations. And therefore this was seen as real multi-stakeholder approach. So the Commission on Science Technology, again it's a UN, has continued to champion that stakeholder model, and it provided and it continues to provide opportunities for all stakeholders to dialogue on an equal footing in the working groups on internet governance improvement and on enhanced cooperation on public policy matters pertaining to the internet. And therefore the first working group which I participated in, we already concluded last year, but work continues. So the working group, as we left, we actually still support the continuation of the dialogue so that there is some conclusion on how this work continues. So in terms of the members that have participated and in terms of an African position, Africa supports enhanced cooperation, but again it emphasizes on the need that gives, giving governments that equal opportunity to exercise legitimate roles, using the existing mechanisms for cooperation. And we say that this needs to be sustained. If there's going to be a different mechanism, then our suggestion is that that should evolve through national or sub-regional or international consensus on how that should be done, again with all stakeholders participating. And to conclude, again, Africa, we concluded and said we still continue support the continuation of the working group on enhanced cooperation, and we also support the renewal of WSIS in December.
Questions? Please start shooting your hands up.
Thank you. The ladies don't seem to be raising their hands. Well, I'll go with the gentleman. I think Ali first. Just keep, there's Brian, then the gentleman in maroon or red, then the gentleman at the back, then Andrew, in that order. Please, Ali.
Thanks, Barrack. First, I want to acknowledge yourself, Barrack, and the speakers, because I think this afternoon the topics have been quite heavy, and we've tried as much as possible to try and disseminate the information, but the acronyms that were flying around, wow. My head was really. So, before I do this, I think for all of us here, I think it's really, really important for us to sort of try a way to, for lack of another word, to consumerize some of the information that we are. And I think that's why we find it so difficult sometimes to understand a lot of the stuff. On a light note, for me as a Muslim, multi-stakeholderism might mean that I have 4 wives. But seriously, I'm reminded of a story that I always like to give about my late uncle, when I was trying to explain to him about 10 years ago how email works. And he was then about 75 years old, and I sort of took him through, those are the days of dial-up. For those of you who are young, who don't understand what that word means, it meant that you remove that wire from the telephone, put it on the computer, go to the loo, come back, still trying to, to connect. So I was explaining to him about, I have brothers who work out of the country at that time, how he doesn't need to go to posta anymore. We have a computer in the house, we can help him to sort of send the letter. And he listened very attentively for about 10 minutes. And then at the end of it, I realized I have not gone through his head at all, because he asked me one question, and I said, okay, that's enough. So he asked me, so where do you put the stamp? That was email, okay. So I'm reminded today about, I continuously find ways to sort of communicate what we want, because a lot of these things are of huge importance for all of us. This whole IANA transition is something that we must all understand. And to say that in Africa we are very far behind is to actually underestimate that issue. So I think I want to challenge all of us, including myself, that going forward, we need to really find ways to simplify a lot of this discussion that we're having. It's the only way we are going to engage the Wanjikos and the Mwananchis. I don't know how you call them in Uganda. For some reason in Kenya we've latched on the word Wanjiko to mean the common man. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ali. Yes, Brian?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just have two questions and one comment. I think I'll start with in the order that they came in. First is on the IANA transition. Thanks a lot for the presentation. But I don't know why, and I don't know if anybody else sort of felt the way I feel as you described the processes and the hierarchy, especially in the new structure. You know, having been in industry, in different organizations, both private sector, public sector, as well as non-profit, management by committee is always a disaster. And I don't know whether it looks like the new structures, especially with regards to the oversight on IANA, on ICANN, is going to end up being that. Because now you have disaggregation where IANA is going to be a legal entity on its own, ICANN will be a separate entity, then you have a committee to oversee this one, then another committee to oversee that one, and double check them and cross check them, and yet within their own internal structures, there are those oversight mechanisms, internal oversight and so on and so forth, and they also have external oversight in that they report to others. I don't know whether we are taking accountability to the extent where it will paralyze the functions of these very critical organizations. So that's my only input there. Second is more of a comment on the WSIS presentation. Patrick, excellent, lovely. The whole of today, I think your presentation or your input has been the most stimulating because you actually came up with concrete proposals to present to us so that we can consider forwarding to the global IGF. Thank you very much for that, and I wish we could be able to have had, at least even from the panelists before, one or two concrete proposals that they put on the table for consideration by the group, because at the end of the day there has to be an output from this event that will be taken to other quarters. And finally, it's to Grace on enhanced cooperation. Just to start off by saying multi-stakeholderism can be extremely exhausting. I couldn't help noticing, as you described the process of enhanced cooperation over the past few years, how many times you said, we did not agree, they did not agree, we did not agree, they did not agree, we did not agree, until eventually somebody had to put their foot down. I think in most cases it was the Secretary General, right? So, it can be exhausting, especially when consensus is just about to be reached. Then a newcomer comes and very loudly starts making noise and saying, no, because they don't understand the background. Then a year later, after they've been able to learn, they're like, yes, let's do it. But you've lost that amount of time, So, we were just commenting between ourselves here with Ali that, sometimes, yes, it's great to have the multi-stakeholder approach. It's great to be as inclusive as possible, but it's never ever possible to have 100% consensus on anything. So it's important that as we consider these different elements and factors of enhanced cooperation and multi-stakeholderism that we remember, or we try to ensure that at least once we reach a certain threshold of consensus, then let's make a decision, because it will take us forever if we have to wait for everybody to come on board. And I think as more players and actors get more interested in issues around internet governance, as we have begun to see over the past few years, it becomes harder and harder and harder, and we end up in situations such as the challenge I was sort of seeing with the IANA transition. So many interested parties, everybody wants to have, a touch on controlling things. They insist on creating all these structures that might at the end of the day paralyze the good thing that we want to do. At the end of the day, we only want these systems to work, the IP addresses to work, the numbers to work, and the internet to grow. But here we have, committees and other things which probably equate to about 200 people. They have created jobs for themselves, which in a way we might end up paralyzing the very good things that the people are actually doing on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please introduce yourself, gentlemen. Keep it short and crisp. Oh, there's a lady now. You will speak after Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Joshua Msasizi, and I work with the ICANN magazine, JR Spectrum. I'm going to ask 3 brief questions, and one is going to Ernest. Ernest, about your presentation of IPv6. We are all aware about the laws that govern the manufacture of electronics. You have to follow the FCC laws. So, now for your IPv6, you said it is not backwards compatible to IPv4. Isn't that a bit expensive for us? And can't those experts that produce IPv6 consider backward compatibility? That is my first question. And the second one is actually open about I want to ask about the CTLD. That when you look at the domain, our domain of .co.ug is privately owned, and we are all talking about data security and so on. So can someone tomorrow come up with a domain of, let me say, ura.co.ug and then defraud all of us? So then my last question is about child protection. We are all aware that even a 4-year kid these days has a tablet. Parents just tablet you give to a kid, and they all have internet access. So as government, now I will ask Mr. Patrick about, because you're coming from UCC, about data protection, child protection. What has government done to protect our children from, let me say, pornography and what that is on the internet? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Andrew? Andrew is here. Oh, okay, no problem.
Thank you, Barrack.
Sorry.
My name is Daniel Chibonya from Internet Freedom Uganda Network, and I'm the current secretary for Gender Disability at the Executive Committee for ISOP Uganda. Mine is Mr. Patrick Mwesigwa from UCC. You made a comment and said there are not deliberate policies in place to bar women from accessing the internet. Yes, I agree with you. There are no deliberate policies in place barring women from accessing internet, and then there are no policies in place to protect women and tap online violence against women on the internet. And there are such policies and laws in place bar women from accessing the internet. For example, how would you bring to justice a man who refuses the wife to own a mobile phone or to access the internet? So the lack of such often bars women from accessing the internet. So
thank you.
Hi, Andrew here from Liquid Telecom. Ernest, question for you about V6. So, yourself, myself, a lot of other people in this room have been evangelizing V6 for 10, 15 years. We're now seeing some uptake. Do you believe that the lack of feature parity that exists in V6 today is holding back its deployment? Because the facts are, there is a lack of feature parity. no MPLS, no various other things that are available in V4. And how do we convince the bodies like the IETF and the vendors to actually start giving us the feature parity to make the deployment happen slightly faster, since we are reaching a critical point where without the V6 and without that feature parity, we're going to be in deep, deep trouble. So I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Thank you. The lady, last but not least, and then our panelists will respond. The lady over there.
I'm Lona Simiyu from the Ministry of ICT. Previously I was in education. I participated in many field visits in schools which were offered computers from UCC. And in fact, they were having challenges because they didn't have teachers to train them even to use those computers. So you would find at times the computers are still covered. So the challenge is, if these schools have not been connected even to the internet, I don't know how they will really learn about this internet. So when I attended in Turkey last year, the UN Internet Governance Forum, we suggested that they could, because they could offer some funds to education ministries, especially in developing countries, so that they could benefit and also learn, they maybe be connected and also learn this internet governance. Because if they learn from the roots up country, it would help them also to know and also maybe tell the community what is going on with internet governance, because they are lagging behind. In those schools, they still have the computers, they didn't have access at times to even electricity, but I know with time they will be connected, but still there is need for financing those schools, because after getting the computers, when you ask them, they would say, oh, we cannot afford this and that, even when the computers get faulty. Getting the technicians is also another challenge. Getting the teachers who are educated in computer, it is also another challenge. So the people who have done the training in IT, there is still very good opportunities in education for teachers who have done computer training. Another issue I wanted to talk about is this IPv4 transiting to IPv6. Our colleague there had already talked about it, but still I support the issue of the organizations who are going to transit, who are going to play that part, to support those on IPv4 to transit to IPv6, because it will be a challenge in developing countries to just automatically or to pay for extra services to transit. You will be letting these other people drag behind, and few people will benefit, those who will be on IPv6. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your recommendations. I think I'm going to give my panelists 2 minutes each to respond to the issues that have been raised on the floor, and also make closing remarks, because we've run out of time. I think I will start with Bob, coming this way.
Thanks, Barrack. Mine will be very quick. First of all, to really urge all of us to, in as much as we agree that it's a tedious process and a lot of acronyms, and which does not even make it easier, including challenges of even internet availability and stuff like that. But the reality is that decisions are happening at the global level, which ultimately will affect all of us. I remember the case of digital migration, and when the deadline came, everybody was caught unawares. I really hope that this IANA stewardship transition should not be the same case, that we are aware that it is happening, and in as much as And however hard it is, we try and give our input, because I think this opportunity might not come again. So very quickly on the two questions I had, of course, Brian, your worries are taken care of. It's a challenge for all of us, very complicated process, we agree. And we continuously work on trying to simplify this thing. In terms of the ecosystem, or what has been proposed to replace the US government, as you rightly, depending from where you stand, state that it's even complicating the whole thing, yet the idea is just to make sure that the internet is working every day. Of course, those proposals have come from respective constituencies, so that is how maybe the numbers guys were seeing that this will make it easier for us. The names guys also thought that that would make it easier for them. But that is why there was a provision for the end users who are maybe not even names or numbers or any other person to also weigh in and say that, look guys, this might make sense for the rest of you, but I have no idea what you're talking about. This is complicated for me, and that was the reason for feedback. And the tragedy is that feedback has not come. And I'm not sure whether it is missed yet, but I think we can still raise up our hands and write and say, I think this might look too complicated, or this might actually be doing the wrong thing. So remember, it can only come from you, the community, and not us. So, lastly, on .ug for Joshua, what I can say is that, so at ICANN level, we have two types of domains. So we have generic names, so .coms and the likes, which are commercial names. And whoever operates those names have contract with ICANN. And then we have country code names, which from where we stand belongs to countries. And as long as a country is recognized by the UN, the cctld.ug, for example, is given by the ISO. So it's even a standard. It's not even given by ICANN. ICANN only facilitates a country that is ready to operationalize their cctld to make sure that it is working. But .ug, or a country code, is a standard by the ISO, and therefore it belongs to countries. In terms of who is managing it, really we believe that there should be national consensus on the best approach that works for a specific country. What works in Kenya might not work in Uganda, might not work in UK and such. And a lot of studies have actually shown that multi-stakeholder platform might work for one country, while the other country, a government-owned scenario is working better, and in another one, a privately owned scenario is working better. So it's really on the stakeholders in that country to come up and say that for us, this is the way we want this thing to work. Once that is agreed, then ICANN will simply say yes to your wish. So we could discuss that maybe in another offline. Thank you.
Thank you. The first comment was from Brian. Brian, I can really thank you for your comment. Indeed, my recommendations is food for thought for us to think about. Thank you very much for that. Then Joshua commented about what UCS is doing about child online protection. We are actively involved in this program. We are working closely with the Ministry of ICT and NITA. You will remember last year, some of you might recall, we hosted an African conference here in Uganda on child online protection in collaboration with the ITU. ITU has a group, a focus group, which works on child online protection. Uganda hosted this conference where we shared best practices, and now I think it is NITA spearheading it. We are coming up with a framework, national framework, to address the child online protection. So we are doing a lot of work, and I think our media presenter this morning talked about child online, what we are doing in child online protection. But thank you very much for that comment. Now there was another comment about, on my comment about participation of women, that there's no deliberate policy denying women access to ICTs. Indeed, I made that statement. But we also appreciate there are some cultural practices which make it hard for women to access ICTs in some instances, like the one I quoted. And indeed, we realize it's still a problem, and that's why in one of my recommendations, I'm saying we should come up with innovative ways of addressing this challenge. It is true, we still have a challenge in this area. Then we had a comment, some comment on computers for schools. As I said in the ED statement at the beginning, UCC has so far connected over, has provided computer labs to over 1,000 secondary schools in Uganda. Now, I do agree there are challenges they are facing in some of these schools. First of all, they are the teachers to teach the ICT courses. Now we are working with the Ministry of Education to also provide basic training in ICTs for the teachers so that they can also teach the students. Now our intervention is a one-off. We provide the computer labs and support the installation for 1 year. After 1 year, the school is supposed to budget for its maintenance. So ours is a one-off intervention. We are not there forever. That's why whoever has benefited from this program, we have to make sure that they are committed to supporting these labs after UCC pulls out. And where there's no power, we are employing solar-powered computers, and quite a number of schools up country have got computers which are solar-powered. And I think the program is improving, and as I said, now ICT is one of the courses being offered in secondary schools. And this is as a result of this intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, my fellow panelists. I will try to answer the questions as they came in. The first one was, I think, concerning the fact that some devices which are imported into the country do not support V6. And I think whoever asked, I was wondering if, why can't we have them approved by, for example, the way the FCC does in the US. Maybe perhaps our regulator here would probably do the same thing to make sure that V6 incompatible devices do not enter the country, if I understood the question there. And I believe that that's actually a good idea. It's one of the ways that the UCC or whoever is in charge would make sure that all CPEs and other devices that are coming into the country support the next generation of the internet protocol, such that when we have actually moved eventually, the devices do not have to be updated or overhauled for them to be able to support IPv6. So if the UCC have that in their mandate, it's not unreasonable to expect that they should be able to enforce it or plan to enforce it. So I think, yeah, your question perhaps was rhetorical, and I think that's a good idea, personally. Regarding backwards compatibility, your worry was that V6 and V4 are not backwards incompatible, and that's unfortunately how the protocol was designed by the Internet Engineering Task Force. They have discussed a couple of times the possibility to make it backwards compatible, I believe the guys that designed the protocol are a group of very smart gentlemen and ladies, very smart engineers. They must have looked at the option of backwards compatibility, and it's probable that the science did not work out to make it backwards compatible. So I believe that at this stage it is a bit pointless, not worth the energy to discuss the option of backwards compatibility, and I think it's better to focus your energies more on working out your IPv6 migration and transition strategies. There are technologies in place to have the two protocols coexist, but they are all really stopgap measures. And at the end of the day, let's forget backwards compatibility and focus our energies more on how we can transition and migrate from V4 to V6. I did not get the question of, I think somebody says that it is expensive or might be expensive to move to V6, and I think that it's not expensive because these days, by default, like I said, most devices, if you buy a brand new cell phone that runs Android, if it's a smartphone, chances are odds are about 90% that it actually supports IPv6. Now, for the network operators who this message is actually mainly meant for, because remember, you as a user, at the end of the day, nobody expects you to know IPv6 or IPv4. It's none of your business. It doesn't concern you. All you want is an internet connection on your device. So it should not be expensive for you at the end of the day to connect to an IP, to have an IPv6 ready internet connection. It's none of your business. It's the ISP, it's your ISP that should be able to serve the internet connection to you either over IPv6 or over IPv4. So the cost of the expense to the user really does not, it's much. The user doesn't care, all they want is to get connected. How the ISP or how their provider delivers the connection, it's their business. The fact is that in the near future, if any ISP that chooses to stick back and if you find that they are expensive, it's your choice to go to somebody who can give you a connection for cheap. I'm trying to go through the questions. So Andrew asked about future parity in some of the equipment that the manufacturers or the vendors provide to ISPs. You noted that they've missed some key features that you need to be able to deploy your networks using some of the technologies. And without going into details, I mean myself and yourself, especially you run a business, and well, the first thing to keep in mind is that IPv6 is, I would not want to say new, but it is still relatively, we're evangelizing it, but it is still, the uptake of V6 is still not yet, that's why we are talking about it. So the fact that we are preaching this to the ISPs probably means that somebody needs to preach the same gospel to the vendors. Now, I am not so much involved in deployment of network infrastructure these days, but what I know is that most vendors, I would imagine the common names like Cisco, I don't know your experience, I would imagine that most vendors really must have gone already the extra mile to make sure that most of the equipment at least have those features. I will admit that many of them may not have had all the features in there just because of the novelty of the protocol. It is still, maybe they are also still understanding it. But your money should decide if, why should you buy equipment from a vendor that has not deployed the features you want. Again, that goes down to planning. If you're planning IPv6 migration and deployment, perhaps you might put a little homework into finding out which vendor has the features you want to avoid a situation where you've gone maybe halfway into deployment and you find that the features you want are not there. So I believe that we are still in the process where both the IP network operators and the vendors are also in that transition of getting the equipment ready for V6 and give it time, give them the feedback, and they'll put in the features you want. Somebody asked about the supporting companies or enterprises or IP network operators that are planning to move to IPv6. What kind of support do they have so that it's not expensive for them to migrate? And from the perspective, from the context of what AFRINIC does or has in place, number one, I mentioned it earlier in my presentation, we do understand that once you have equipment in production, you cannot just decide to deploy IPv6 on it because you have customers there, they are paying you and you cannot disrupt their services. Therefore, you either need to buy new equipment to try out with, or the alternative we provided to the community globally, not just in Africa, is that we partnered with some organizations, Cisco inclusive, to have virtual labs. These virtual labs are accessible remotely. Information about them is on our website. So if you feel you want to try out V6 without actually having to buy equipment or destabilizing your production networks, talk to us. We shall give you access to the virtual labs along with all the instructions that you need to access them, their topologies, etc. And you can log into them with your team and do whatever you want to do. Perhaps that will give you most of the exposure that you will need, because some of their topologies are a bit complex, or at least match what most ISPs have out there. And access to these virtual labs is free. I do believe that and we do encourage actually that the regulator, for example, UCC or even NITA will put such provisions in place such that anybody in Uganda that wishes to have such a service actually would also access it without necessarily having to connect all the way to Mauritius or Australia or Europe, where our virtual labs are actually located. If you're in the same network here, and I will go through the IXP, and it will be much faster for you to use a virtual lab if it were present locally. So, Mr. Mwesigwa, I hope that is something you could consider. We also offer free training. Our training as AFRINIC, we move around the continent roughly every month to different locations, conducting IPv6 training. It's a course that goes on for 3 days. It is a fairly technical course, actually. Once you come to that course, after 3 days, you have the exposure that you need to be able to go out and start trying out things with IPv6. We have had good reviews about our training courses. They are meant mainly for engineers, people that already have good technical background working with IPv4. All you have to do is look out for where we're going next. We normally send out announcements to the usual mailing lists, but this information is also on our website. The training courses are totally free. Just get yourself there. The other incentive we have at AFRINIC is that we do not charge companies that want to acquire IPv6 address space at the moment. The board could change that, but at the moment it is free. So we've tried to see if we can put these initiatives in place and hopefully they could accelerate the uptake of IPv6. Lastly, yes, it was also a comment about the fact that it could be expensive to pay for IPv6 services. As I said earlier, there are really no IPv6 services, and all you care about as a user is getting an internet connection, whether it's over V6 or V4. So it should not cost you more to get an IPv6 internet connection. An internet connection is an internet connection, irrespective of how it is delivered to you. So,
Brian, I entirely agree with your sentiments that multi-stakeholderism is not easy. And it's not just in internet governance debates, but in other areas. if I can just give a small example, you remember in Kenya in 2007 when the land leases were coming to an end, the 99 land leases, and there was this huge debate about who owns Kenya. And the Maasais were saying they own up to Nakuru. The Dorobos said, no, you actually came and found us and you pushed us. Then the Sungweyo said they own from Mount Elgon all the way to Naivasha. And I remember, I think what they agreed was that they needed to have a cut-off date of who owned what at that particular time. And that's why I agree with the idea, and I think for me this is what I'll take home. It's really important that we have a threshold. So we actually need to have, I think in all discussions probably we will need to articulate a threshold within which we can make a decision after certain decision. Because like the CSTD's meeting, the first session we thought we had agreed. Then when it came now to going through the entire document, we just realized that these last minute people that you said came in and sort of disagreed. We had a full day debate when it came to inclusion of gender in internet governance. And there were particular people who were very opposed to that and ensured that they derailed the discussions for a complete, I think it was even 1.5 days that we still did not agree. So, however, even with all those challenges, I think when it comes to internet, because it is distributed, we can't really have one person making decisions. And therefore, we must always endeavor to have these multi-stakeholder discussions. And I think we have seen a good example in the IGFs, where we have all people represented. And things have worked because we've had very honest discussions about issues that actually have led to policy decisions and policy that leads to legislation. So for me, I would say that even with the challenges, I think let us endeavor to entrench multi-stakeholderism in our discussions, but again, bringing this perspective of having a threshold within which we can make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Last but not least, I understand, Gloria, you wanted to make a comment on the .ug delegation, the .ug CCTLD question, and then I will hand over the floor to the MC after that.
Thank you very much, Barrack. Somebody in the audience raised a question regarding .go.ug. I just wanted to let you know that Uganda, we decided to take the option of a multi-stakeholder model to involve everybody from the internet community. And that's how we've approached it, other than the thinking of saying it's a government resource, we should take it over from the current administrator. So that's how we've done it at the moment. And we have a working relationship at the moment. Nobody from the community can just go there and register without consultations. Back end, we're working with the current administrator as much as we are coming up with a model to make sure that it's more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for my panelists as we hand over to the MC. And thank you for your patience as well.